Well, hello, my friends. This is episode 54 of Stand Up with Pete Dominic. Sorry, I'm singing. Just in kind of a good mood tonight because I think that we really got this coronavirus thing wrapped. I think President Trump and Mike Pence have it completely under control, and now Larry Kudlow is on the case as well. And my wife ordered some masks, but they don't come until May. So we're probably all going to be dead by then anyway. And you're not supposed to be getting the masks. I talk about that with Dr. Arthur Caplan coming up. And also joining me on today's episode, Emily Atkin of Heated.World, one of the best climate journalists in the country. She's got an awesome newsletter that I pay for and get every day in my email box. And we had another great conversation and lots of great new journalism. We shit on billionaires and have a thoughtful conversation about the world that is getting more and more heated. She offers ideas. It's really good. You're going to love it. All of that is coming up right now on Stand Up. Hey, friends. All right, guys, let's do this. Thank you very much for joining me, as always, here on the Stand Up with Pete Dominic podcast. I know there are other podcasts that you can be listening to. And when you start to leave me, I want you to remember me sitting here working hard with my amazing network of expert guests that I have available to me. That is the value of this show as it is. It's me and these very smart people whose phone numbers I have, and if I don't have them, I find them. I want you to remember me and come back to me here on Stand Up, because we're always having great, thoughtful, thought-provoking, informative, enlightening, sometimes hilarious conversation with the best experts I can find. And I appreciate all of your input. Who should I have on next? Email me, tweet me, and join our community on Patreon with a paid subscription. You can find out more information in the links, the show notes, wherever you listen to the podcast, also PeteDominic.com, and go to patreon.com/PeteDominic to sign up for a paid subscription. And welcome to all the new subscribers. Thank you very much. A whole bunch in the last day. I think we got 6, and I definitely need more. We need more. 3 podcasts a week, and we're going to add a whole bunch of new content to the Patreon page. It's only available to the Patreon community. I got some good ideas up my sleeves, working behind the scenes on that. So, sign up. Okay, lots going on with this coronavirus, lots to learn, and Dr. Arthur Caplan, as always, with some great insights, ideas, and let's just say I went and got gas, canned food, and water after this conversation. You're going to want to listen to it. He's one of the most respected bioethicists in the country. He is now at NYU. Before that, he was at University of Pennsylvania and I think University of Minnesota. He's on Twitter at Arthur Caplan, and he's very kind to join me right now. Hello, Dr. Caplan.
Hey, how are you, Pete?
I'm great. Thank you very much for letting me call you. Everybody is losing their mind over coronavirus. I've talked to an epidemiologist. Now I want to talk to a bioethicist. So let's start at what happened last night, Dr. Caplan. You had a press conference. The president has appointed Mike Pence, who believes the moon is made of cheese, to handle the coronavirus. What is your response to what we saw last night?
Pathetic. Just not the leadership you need. You know, Pete, I'm getting bombarded with questions everywhere I go. If I get in a taxi in New York City, somebody's going to ask me, is it safe to be a driver and be exposed to people? People are asking me about, should they take zinc or selenium or stock up food? All kinds of questions. What the president did last night was say, nothing to worry about, all going to go away, and I'm going to appoint a guy who probably dropped out of his science course in the 7th grade. He'll run the show. I mean, it isn't even clear, by the way, who's running the show, since within, I think, an hour or two, his Secretary of Health and Human Services, Azar, jumped in and said, I'm running the show. It reminded me of General Haig. I'm in charge here.
I don't know what that reference is, General Haig.
Yeah, when there was a time when the president, I think, had to undergo an operation and was under anesthesia. Haig was his Secretary of State, and people were kind of asking who's in charge. And he jumped up out of the blue and said, "I'm in charge. It's me." Similarly, this guy Azar, who's been the Health and Human Secretary, the head of Health and Human Services, which houses CDC and the NIH and those things, who listeners are probably saying, "I never heard from this guy," or "Who is he?" which also is telling about lack of leadership on the coronavirus thing. Anyway, he jumped up after Trump said it's Pence, and he said, "No, it's me." So we don't even have a clear voice right now about who is in charge of the effort to get ready for this.
Speaking of getting ready, are we ready? Are we prepared? Are we unprepared? How do we answer those questions? What should we be doing? What should a wealthy, civilized, educated country like ours with a healthcare system and a government like ours be doing in a situation like this?
There's so much to do to get ready, and we should be getting ready. Let's hope that the coronavirus comes here and it doesn't really transmit rapidly, and it proves something that we can take care of in the hospital, and it's not so bad. But I'm worried, just watching South Korea, pretty advanced country with a pretty advanced healthcare system, a lot of cases, a lot of deaths. So it's making me nervous. So we got to prepare for the worst. And that would mean many things that Trump and the administration and our leadership are not doing. First, here's a call I got yesterday. A nurse wanted to know, somebody was fearful that he had been to Italy and thought maybe he had symptoms of what this was. And she said to me, "What do I do with that person?" And I said, "Well, look, probably we wait to see what the symptoms are. But whatever you do, don't send him to an emergency room, because then he's going to infect everybody there, and they're not set up, with protective masks and all the rest of it to deal with a guy like this. So at best, send him to a single doctor, get him examined there. Maybe somebody can go to his house from visiting nurse service, but it doesn't matter. The point is, people out there in the healthcare field aren't ready yet to know what to do. If you or me or somebody said, "Gee, I was in one of these places or I was on a plane and I think maybe I've got the symptoms. Where do I go? Who do I see? What's the response?" We're not ready. We got people, as I said earlier, asking about, should I wear masks? Should I stock up masks?
Should I shave my beard? That's going viral.
That was big advice. Yeah. Should I, take immune boosting things at the general health store? That kind of stuff. We need a clear, repeated set of instructions about what to do here. I wish the president would have said a few things about that when he gave his speech. I haven't heard Pence or Azar or anybody say anything, and you got to say it many times. People are busy. You're going to have to present it a lot.
There's a leadership handbook for this. It doesn't require an Ivy League education. You could, as a leader, have your advisors tell you exactly what you should be saying, your public health advisors, and you should say it over and over as you're saying, and have a campaign, like a PR campaign, to tell people exactly what to expect and what to do. Fair enough?
Fair. And only that I would say you don't need an NYU education, not that Ivy League thing, but but you would say everybody knows from ad campaigns, if they want to sell you beer, how often do they show you the beer ad? Like once every 32 seconds? I mean, it's like...
Well, the ad I'm seeing nonstop online is an ad for face masks. So just real quick, Dr. Arthur Caplan, should people be buying these face masks? Because speaking of bioethics, there's a question about who should be getting them and who shouldn't be getting them.
Doctors, nurses, people at hospitals and nursing homes should be getting them. You don't need one. They don't work that well, and you don't know how to operate it. You'd have to change it too often to make it work anyway. Nope. I say get a lot of Purell, buy a lot of soap. Hand sanitary behavior is going to be key here.
Dr. Aaron Carroll says 20 seconds. Scrub those hands for 20 seconds.
Yep.
That's what the research says. Okay, so you wrote a piece back in 2016 for the healthcare blog. I'll share it in the show notes and on social media, titled "The End of Civilization and the Real Donald Trump." And it is frighteningly prescient, sir.
My Nostradamus article. I wasn't up enough to, or smart enough to foresee the coronavirus. I was figuring it would be swine flu, another round of that. And what I said in the article was, Trump went into denial. Then he started to try and shut the borders. Then he basically tried to lock up people, particularly minority people, saying, well, they must be a source of infection. Then he went even screwier and tried to quarantine people. But again, even if we tried that here, this isn't China. So he didn't know how to enforce it. So he started having people shot or arrested if they broke the quarantine, which, by the way, we have to have a discussion of now. How would we do quarantine? And then ultimately, he declared a gigantic trade war on China, blaming them for racist reasons for causing the whole epidemic. I mean, it's a nasty scenario, and I basically wrote it because I thought Trump doesn't know anything about science. He doesn't trust it on climate change. He doesn't trust it on pollution. Why would he be trusting it on an epidemic? And I'm not sure he does right now.
This was an article that you wrote kind of predicting what could happen under a Trump administration. Let's answer that question about the quarantine. Why does it work effectively in a country like China? And why, as you told me in our last conversation, does it not work so effectively here? Because you mentioned in our last conversation during the Ebola crisis, there was a healthcare worker that was quarantined alone, and she just left. Like, we couldn't do it, as you said, to one person.
Casey Hickox was put, after being in an Ebola area, the governor of New Jersey, then Chris Christie, put her in a tent at the Newark airport, which had no running water or much else. And she said, I'm not staying here, and literally left. And we had no decision or agreement like, well, the state police would arrest her, or somebody would taser her, or we would wave goodbye to her. Anyway, she left and went to Maine. I don't think that's China. I think when the Chinese, dictatorship says you're staying in this city of 11 million and don't come out the door, the implicit idea is if you do come out the door, you're going to be living with the Uyghurs in some place in outer Mongolia, right?
I'm trying not to laugh. Yeah.
So they don't put up with that stuff. And I don't know what we would do to enforce quarantine here. We have civil rights orientation, personal freedom orientation. There's a fair number of people with guns who might say, I'm not doing this. So I don't even really think quarantine's an option for us, to tell you the truth. I mean, you could suggest stay home, but... Yeah.
Is it an effective... Does it work? Is it effective? I mean, when it was applied in China and where...
You know what? It doesn't... Pete, it doesn't really work. It slows things down. It reduces the transmission and the speed of the disease, and what you're trying to do is buy time to discover a medicine or a vaccine. So it slows things down, and I think it did slow the epidemic down in China, even though they had cases. They didn't have as many as they might have. So it helps, but it's not a solution. It's not a cure.
What about travel restrictions? Are they effective?
Not really, again, because there's too much leakage, if you will. Passengers go through other routes. You say, well, no one's coming in here from Italy, or you can't come in here from Romania or someplace that has reported a case. But you know how travel works. People go from A to B, and then they transit through London, and no one is really tracking that they've been in a place that had a case. So I don't know. And then you're on planes with people who are from these countries. They get off, you're still there. I don't think travel restrictions solve the thing, but they may intercept a few cases. Again, it's a little bit of an assist, but it's not an answer.
Going back to leadership and preparedness, public health experts and leaders in communities and states should be telling citizens what to expect. So maybe we're not hearing enough of that. I think the mayor of San Francisco declared some kind of a state of emergency there, even though they don't have any confirmed cases. So if you were advising leaders in different communities and states, what would you tell them to be telling us in a calm way about our kids' school and our activities? And really, should I just go to Costco and buy a case of beans, Dr. Caplan?
So I'd say this. Be ready. You might be home for a couple of weeks. It wouldn't hurt to have some water and food around. You don't need it for a year, but it might be okay to have, if you will, some extra supply on hand that would tide you over. Yeah. And I tell them, look, your daycare center may be closed. It may be that your elementary school is closed. I think Japan has already done that as a way to reduce transmission. Be ready to be home and talk to your employer right now about, what's going to happen if I have to stay home and I got kids and I can't use daycare, then I can't get them to school. So those are preparatory things we should be discussing. If there is a quarantine, what are we going to do to enforce it? Really? I mean, what's going to happen? Are you going to get arrested? is the cop who arrests you going to wear a hazmat suit? Are they going to take you to jail and let you mingle with other people who broke the quarantine, but maybe that's an incubator for disease? Should you get ready to travel? I might be watching my travel plans on the next couple of months, just thinking I'm ready to cancel if I have to, or if I got something important, maybe I go now and don't wait. So there's a lot that could be said. I don't hear anybody saying it.
Well, that's a little bit scary. Why would we need water? What happens with our water supplies?
Just having around something that in case, let's say, the people who run the water system or the electrical system don't get there. It's not so much that the water's polluted. I'm worried more about people going to work, who can get in. What if you have a water main break, you get a problem, that sort of thing. You're not necessarily going to have somebody zipping over to your house in the little van.
What are some other kind of bioethics questions in terms of, the vaccine seems like it's a very long way off, that we don't have that. But there's a question over vaccine, giving the vaccine to people who are in prison or undocumented people. There's these priorities and ethical choices about who gets the vaccine. What's the answer to that?
So again, I think when our president and others have spoken, they often say something like, don't worry, things are under control. We got no cases here. Keep walking, move on. Nothing to see here, which is nuts. And they also say, and you know what, a vaccine is coming or medicine is on the way. And look, medicine may be on the way. Although if it is on the way, it's going to take at least 6 months to 9 months to prove that you can give it to somebody without killing them, because you have to test it a little bit. You can't just dump it out, into the world. Vaccines are even harder to make and discover. So I'll say they're a year out. But let's say we get something. Somebody announces, I've got a vaccine and I gave it to mice and they didn't get sick, and here we go. So last time I looked, there are 8 billion people in the world. There are 300 million people here. You got to make the vaccine, right? So you got to make doses. And it's not like we have 300 million doses from the get-go. So you have to decide who's first, who's getting access to either a drug that cures you or a vaccine that prevents it. And I'm going to say what we tend to do is look away from prisons or ICE detention centers, but they may be exactly the kind of place where the virus spreads fast because they're in bad, unsanitary circumstances, close contact. Maybe they ought to get priority so they don't give it to the rest of us. Doctors, policemen, people who make the vaccines and their families, do they get it first so they can keep doing that? People who deliver the stuff, we ought to be talking about who's deciding and who would go first. So if and when that happens, then we're all ready to accept these decisions rather than having riots about it.
All right. Well, a lot more questions. I've taken up enough of your time. I appreciate you being a great source.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Follow him on Twitter, and we will be in touch soon. Thank you very much, Dr. Arthur Caplan.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that guy is awesome. Love talking to Arthur Caplan. If you enjoyed that, go back and listen to my entire episode. I did a whole hour with him, and I went up to his house in Connecticut, hung out with him, and we talked for like an hour. It was a really great conversation. And that was back in, what episode number was that? 45. Check out episode 45. And yeah, after I talked with him, I went out to the gas station and I filled up my gas tanks for my generator, and I filled up a whole bunch of bottles of water, and I got some like perishable, non-perishable foods. Perishable or non-perishable foods, like cans of beans and some rice, and I don't know. I've never done anything like that, but if everything's going to just shut down for a little while, and I hope it doesn't, but and I don't mean to scare anybody, but for Caplan to be talking that way, I got to get Aaron Carroll on. He's in Europe. I'll talk to him. I'll talk again, of course, to Dr. Megan May. We'll all follow this closely. We'll support each other, and hopefully the internet doesn't break down, because then we can just keep talking this way, as well as on Patreon, where I'm trying to create a private chat for Patreon subscribers only, using a couple different apps I'm experimenting with right now. So check us out at patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Be a paid subscriber there, and we'll just keep supporting each other, not only through this, but through everything else that we're all dealing with. Okay, now I've got to get to my second guest of episode 54, the great Emily Atkin. Emily is one of my favorite journalists. I'm proud to be a paid subscriber to Heated.World. She's on Twitter at @mmoree. EMORWEE on Twitter, where she's excellent, and you should sign up for a subscription. Her newsletter, Heated, gets delivered to your email box every day. In this conversation, we talk about natural gas. We shit all over billionaires. We talk about the importance of integrity in journalism and why independent journalism matters, and so much more. Here now, my conversation with Emily Atkin of Heated.World. And now let's get to the great Emily Atkin. Here are the heated sound effects, according to me, on this podcast at least. Hi, Emily.
Sup?
I'm branding your entire company, your entire newsletter with my sound effects. Anyway,
I'll take it.
Thank you for joining me. It's great to have you. Your work has been amazing. I look forward to it every day. I'm super psyched to be paying for it. Just a word from you about independent journalism and how you're doing what you're doing. There's a bunch of other really great people doing it as well.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have a reader-supported publication. I don't even know how I got so lucky to have that be the case, but it is 100% supported by readers. I don't have any ads. They don't have any corporate sponsors and no venture capitalists. None of those motherfuckers. Am I allowed to say that?
Anything you want. What does that mean?
Cool.
Why do you do it that way? What is it? It creates a purity and integrity to your work that it can't be influenced and biased by ads?
Well, I think it just, for me, really what it means is that I'm only accountable to my readers, and my readers know that the only people that the journalism is for and created for is them. It's honestly to give readers a peace of mind that, you know, and knowledge and trust that everything that comes from me is literally it's just me. You know, there's no ulterior motive. Every decision I make there's no way that I would make a decision that, like, maybe I won't cover this because it would piss off an advertiser, or there's just nothing there. And also, you know, especially my paid subscribers, the ones that really support me, they have say in what I cover, and they have influence in what I cover. Because if I get a bunch of people who are paid subscribers saying, you know, I didn't think that you really addressed this argument very well in your last piece, or I'd really like to see coverage of this, you know, I take that into far greater consideration than anything else. Cause, you know, I consider it, journalism is supposed to be a public service. It's supposed to serve a constituency, and my readers are my constituency.
And I can tell that you're responding to them as one of your readers and paid supporters. You feel valued. But I also like this tweet. You're great on Twitter as well. Follow her on Twitter at Emorwee. That's EMORWEE. You wrote, one perk of being a paid subscriber to my newsletter is that we regularly have climate discussions that can't be infiltrated by trolls. Only people who care enough to have bought in can participate. And then you link to a thread about the debate. But I just think that's so great that you have people are invested in the conversation. It's the same with my Patreon, which I hope to start a conversation there. You're not going to get people that are assholes and trolls. And if they are, you can boot them if you want, I suppose. It's
true. And people think that, you know, I tweeted that and there were people saying like, oh, so it's just you're in a bubble talking and you all agree with each other and it's just preaching to the choir.
No,
and
that's not the case.
No, it's not at all. It's one of the most enlightening things that I've even learned about starting this newsletter is that, like, there's just such a diversity of opinion and diversity of experience within people who care about climate change, because there's so many different ways to approach solving climate change, to approach policy, to approach like how you think about it, feel about it. It's just, so it's not preaching to the choir. It's just like a choir with no assholes in it. Like, there's nobody there to poison the well with denial of the problem. Everyone starts from the same baseline, which is that we all care about climate change. We all want to be better informed about it, but we all approach it from different lenses with different opinions. So, and
before we get to the actual content of Heated.World, I'm going to say it like it's live radio. I'm just going to keep doing live reads. Everybody go subscribe. Before we get to content, I want to ask you one more question about journalism, because I always like to talk about journalism with you, because you're such a great journalist with a lot of experience and integrity. And so you have been tweeting about what happened with ABC's David Wright. David Wright was taped by that asshole, whatever I don't even know what you would call his politics. He's just a dishonest guy that's constantly been secretly taping and videotaping people. He's a journalist at ABC, and this kid has done it again. James O'Keefe, that's his name. And he said some things, David Wright, not knowing he was being recorded about his own personal politics and critical of his media outlet, ABC News. And ABC News has suspended him. They're going to take him off political coverage. Why do you and so many other journalists have an issue with that?
Well, I mean, the way that I approach journalism is that I think that it's far more honest to tell your readers sort of what your own biases are and where you come from. I think that's why you see a lot of honesty from me about what I personally think, because it lets readers know where my gaps might be when I'm covering an issue. I think it's ridiculous to expect that this journalist for ABC News has no feelings or political beliefs. And the idea that it's because he self-proclaimed in this video that he was a socialist. And now the ABC News editors are like, oh, well, we're suspending him. And then and when he comes back, we're going to take him off political coverage because we don't want him to seem biased. It's like if he had said in that video that he were a raging capitalist who believed in free markets, I'm pretty sure that we wouldn't have seen him get suspended. I'm pretty sure everyone would have just been like, oh, that's normal. It's about like the normativity of capitalist ideology versus like, oh, it's seen as so radical to have some sort of socialist ideology, even though the current Democratic presidential frontrunner is a Democratic socialist. So it's like, I don't know, there's a lot going on there. But it really, to me, the problem just really boils down to the idea that now he's going to be biased because his opinions on general things are known. And that's not the case.
Let me ask you also about, first of all, you have a recent piece, which is so great. I think it's from this week, line by line addressing Washington Post editorial Fred Hyatt. And you took this one out from behind the paywall and shared it publicly. And I wonder how often you've done that. And I wonder how big of a deal this. I saw a lot of big name journalists and people on Twitter sharing this piece. It was very popular. Why did you do it? Before we get to it, why did you do that? Take it out from behind the paywall?
Oh, just because I immediately got a strong reaction from subscribers that were like, someone said, if you love something, set it free. This one needs to be out there. And I was like, okay. I was like, sure, whatever you guys want, and I honestly, I want to make all my content free. It's just, I also need to eat food. So I have a subscriber program. I don't mind making anything free, but especially if subscribers want a certain paywall wanted to be free, I'll just take it down.
I love it. I love that you did that. And again, Heated.World, everybody, Emily Atkin. So you criticized the Washington Post editorial board last week, and then now you're taking on Fred Hyatt, who's written a column about this. And this is what I'm talking about. And you took it on line by line. I wish I could go through all of it, but we don't have time. And I want to get to just a couple of other pieces while I've got you. His opinion, it seemed you got really fired up when he started basing a lot of what he's saying in this column on the chairman and chief executive of one of the world's biggest oil and gas companies, a guy named Patrick Pouyanné. Am I saying that right?
I don't know. I don't care.
What's the?
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, I think the important thing for your listeners to know is that it's a Washington Post op-ed about climate change policy and like how to solve climate change. And it's this op-ed written by the editorial page editor of the Washington Post. And it's titled How Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders Both Reject the Reality of Climate Change. And the whole article is basically about how Bernie Sanders' climate policy is just as bad as Donald Trump's denial of climate science. And because it doesn't include, according to Fred Hyatt, who's the editorial page editor, because it doesn't have a carbon tax. And the reason why it's so dangerous, he thinks Bernie Sanders is so awful, just like Donald Trump on climate change, is, he bases his entire rationale off of a conversation he had with one of the richest people in the world, the CEO of one of the biggest oil companies in the world. And he doesn't question anything about the profit motives of why perhaps the CEO of one of the biggest oil companies in the world might really not want Bernie Sanders' climate plan. And, he just sort of takes Fred Hyatt, the editorial page editor, just sort of takes this dude at his word, because he says, well, I believe in climate change. Okay. And I want to solve it. But unfortunately, it's just the reality of the world that we can't do it this way. And, and Fred Hyatt's like, that makes sense. Like, you're so reasonable. Like, he just doesn't assess the power motive, the profit motive of this guy at all. Doesn't even address it. And the truth is that, big oil CEOs, the big decision makers behind these companies, are why we are in a climate crisis right now. They're the people who chose to direct their companies to continue extracting and burning fossil fuels, despite knowing 30, 40 years ago that their business model was killing the planet. And they chose not only to do that, but to hide the information about the fact their products were killing the planet, to spend billions of dollars on lobbying and advertising and PR campaigns spreading doubt about the science. They're the reason that we have so many climate deniers today. This is well documented. This is not my opinion, and like the fact that Fred Hyatt this is the editorial page editor of the Washington Post. I mean, like, this is the opinion backbone of one of our most elite news institutions. Can't even address this power motive at all. I'm sitting here just in like a complete rage, being like, what kind of journalist are you? I thought that journalists were supposed to speak truth to power, like what you're just giving a voice to you're supposed to give voice to the voiceless, not give voice to the fucking big oil CEOs. Jesus Christ.
I want you to call me when you're in the rage and I just can press record. I don't know how articulate you are during those moments, but I don't know. But I want to have you heard from Fred Hyatt, by the way?
No.
Based on that criticism, the piece, again, his piece, the Washington Post, I should have said that, to start, is titled "How Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders Both Reject the Reality of Climate Change." You took that line by line. You can read it. It was a whole issue of Heated, and you should check it out. But Emily, you also tweeted after that. You tweeted also, while I really appreciate all the thank yous for the Bernie people, please keep in mind, if you subscribe to Heated, that I ain't Bernie's friend. I'm none of these candidates' friend. If and when they deserve critique, they'll get it. Y'all been warned. I really like that you wrote that. I really like that. I think that's important.
Thank you. And some people were like, oh, okay, like trying to criticize me for that.
Oh,
and
really?
I'm sort of just letting people know that, like, one of the things I think it's really important to do as a journalist is to explain journalism to people along with doing the journalism. I love
that you do that. It's so important, a huge part of your brand, and every journalist should do it. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, it's totally fine. It's just, and that's part of, if you read the Society for Professional Journalists Code of Ethics, Code of Conduct, it's something I think all journalists should read once a month, just to reinforce the principles of what they're doing to themselves. And one of the things that's in there is defend journalism and critique other journalists. And it's just like a basic principle of what we do, and it's totally been lost. And so one of the reasons that, obviously this piece that I wrote criticizing Fred Hyatt, it defends Bernie Sanders from his criticism. And I got a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters thanking me and all this praise, which I'm totally happy about. But I just want to let them know, if they subscribe, do not expect that you're always going to get a pro Bernie Sanders perspective. I think that there are legitimate criticisms that should be explored, fact-based criticisms of Bernie Sanders' climate plan. It's likely that he'll be the Democratic nominee for president. He deserves scrutiny because he's trying to be president. But what nobody deserves is bullshit scrutiny, idiotic scrutiny based on just nothing, based on total profit motive. I really think that Fred Hyatt got totally manipulated and played right into this oil industry's hands here. And it's just it's so disappointing to see. But also,
but you make it almost sound like he shouldn't know better. Like he's almost, the way you say that, he got played. I mean, I know that that's not a source that you should use if you're writing about this issue. I mean, it's he should know better.
I mean, he can use the source. I'm not saying don't interview the CEO of Total. I'm saying if you interview the CEO of Total, go into it with the appropriate amount of skepticism for
Right.
Total's profit motive,
Right.
you know? And if you decide that you agree with the CEO of Total, explain why you agree with it despite these motives. I mean, it's literally another part of journalism that you're taught in school is that you have to assess, you know, people in power will try and use you to push their message. So what is their agenda behind their message? And, you know, as a journalist, sort out that agenda, be truthful about that agenda, and just try to put the most accurate picture forward. Here, the agenda of the Total CEO is not addressed. Actually, Fred Hyatt just assumes that that Total CEO's agenda is just solving climate change. It's actually, it's so wild. It's so wild.
I love it. Heated.World, everybody, for more of this. I'm going to just keep plugging it like it's a live read. I want everybody to subscribe and pay for that subscription. Okay, so you have also covered the billionaires. One of your most recent is Issues of Heated. The newsletter is about Tom Steyer. It's titled, Screw It, Let's Talk About Tom Steyer. I love the way you communicate. I think it's awesome. It makes me want to read it. What do we need to know about Tom Steyer and Michael Bloomberg, who it's pretty, you know, people like to say, as much as we criticize them, at least they've spent a lot of their billions or a lot of their money to fight and create awareness on climate change. What do we need to know about these two?
I mean, I feel like you don't really need to know a lot about Tom Steyer. I feel like that ship has sailed. But just generally about billionaires, even ones that fund good causes, use their money to fund good causes. You know, I wrote about Tom Steyer. I also wrote about Jeff Bezos donating $10 billion over the next 25 years to help the climate crisis. And I wrote a piece about why I thought I'm taking it with several grains of salt. But I think the number one thing to know about them is that they're trying to use their money to exercise control over how we solve things. Right. Billionaire philanthropy is not just a good deed. It's not in itself just a good deed, like a good thing that billionaires do out of the goodness of their hearts. It's stuff that philanthropy really boosts the profile, number one, of billionaires. It makes them seem like very good people. And it's proven, you know, public opinion polling shows that when billionaires are very generous with their money, people are like, that billionaire is a good guy. When in reality, it's sort of like that 10 billion is an enormous amount of money. It is like basically equivalent to the amount of research dollars the United States spends on climate change, or maybe even all of science, like in a year. It's an incredible amount of money. This is pennies to Jeff Bezos, number one. It is the equivalent to in like real dollars, like in how much money it means to him versus how much it would mean to, say, the average young person in America, because it's spread out over 25 years, 10 billion over 25 years. That's 400 million every year. 400 million every year to Jeff Bezos is basically like $33 a year to me. And also my $33 means a lot more to me than Jeff Bezos means to him.
That's
because,
the economics. Yep.
You know, and with that money, Jeff Bezos gets to buy so much of the way that we solve climate change. He gets to buy the decisions that we make on how to solve this problem. And if you go and read any thread that I have about how do we solve climate change, how do you think we should approach this issue or that issue? You know, there's so much differing opinion for how we should approach this around nuclear policy, around carbon capture, around trade, just so many different issues. And with this donation, you know, Jeff Bezos gets to make some decisions. And that I'm talking about Jeff Bezos in particular because that's what we need to know about billionaires. Billionaires use their money to exercise control outside of the democratic system. And that's, I think, the biggest area of critique and concern. I mean, obviously, Bloomberg right now used his money to exercise control outside of the democratic system because he bought millions and millions of dollars worth of ads and without getting a single vote or having a single public opinion poll, bought his way onto the debate stage. Therein, you have an example of somebody using their money to exercise control over what we do outside of the democratic system. And so that's what you need to know.
Yeah, that's very well explained. And it's a super interesting and important issue because you look at billionaires and think of their philanthropy as generosity. But in fact, if you care about one disease more than another, but it's not nearly as impactful, but that's where you're spending your money, that's not good policy. You need government to do this because that's what would be more democratic and that's what would be more effective. It's certainly when it comes to issues like climate change. All right, let me ask you about another story that you covered, which is YouTube, Emily. YouTube is spreading climate lies. It's right. You write at Heated.World, and big brands are making it profitable. A new study reveals that YouTube is pushing millions of people to watch videos with dangerous misinformation about climate change. Give me a little bit of a summary here. What do we need to know about this, and how do you stop YouTube or any other social media from spreading horrific stuff?
Well, actually, so the article that you cited is one that I republished from Judd Legum's newsletter, Popular Information. And that's another really great thing about the newsletters that I get to republish.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I get to republish other people's great reporting. And Judd is I'll always give Judd Legum credit for that story. He's at Popular Information, which is popular.info.
I pay for his too.
Yeah, but that's, that story in particular I was interested in because it shows how it's something that you see on Google and Facebook and Twitter too, which is how basically there's not a lot of monitoring over what the content on these huge social media sites are. So on YouTube, there's all these videos of people just denying climate change, right? And as they get more
convincingly explaining it, though,
right, exactly.
Dangerously.
It's, as they get more viewers, then ads run on those videos. And so then any ad that runs on that video, like the company running that ad makes money off of it. And YouTube makes money off it too, because they have their like YouTube content partnerships. I don't know 100% how those works, but and then they promote those videos as well. So like, there's just these algorithms on YouTube that wind up promoting these videos, and companies who run ads on YouTube. You know how it is. It's like you open a YouTube video and there's like just an ad for something right before you watch it.
Yeah.
If you are a big company, you can choose like what kind of videos to not advertise on. So I think the thing to do with what you asked is, if you don't want to see that, if you see that there are examples of certain companies doing something, advertising on videos you don't want them to advertise on, is just, public pressure works quite a bit on for-profit entities that rely on social license to operate. If there's one thing I've learned covering climate change, it's that the only reason companies do sustainability pro-climate stuff is not out of the goodness of their hearts. It's because if they don't, nobody wants to buy shit from them. And that's
exactly pressure from activists who care deeply, not even activists.
Consumers, just regular people, honestly. And so, you might think that your individual action can really make no difference. But I really believe, because of the evidence, honestly, that, consumer pressure is extremely effective to change corporate behavior. So you learn something about this, just like be an asshole about it.
Yeah, I think we've seen that on 3 issues: LGBT, equality, guns, and sustainability, environmental issues, climate change issues. Maybe you could name more, but these are 3 issues. Racial injustice, at times we've seen that with certain companies as well. But speaking of, there's a company that you interviewed the interim chief executive about this very issue. This issue of Heated is titled "Everything You Want to Know About the Guardian's Historic Ban on Fossil Fuel Ads." You reached out and gave a not easy interview, or not gave. You asked great questions to this woman who is the Guardian's interim chief executive, named Anna Bateson. So what did the Guardian do? What did they announce?
They're no longer going to take ads from fossil fuel companies at all. So any, no ExxonMobil, no Shell, no BP, no Total ads running in the pages of The Guardian anymore, which is a pretty significant step. They're the first major newspaper to do this. The only other newspaper that had done this is this like small socialist newspaper in, I think, Germany, but which I could be wrong. It could be another country. But, the first major newspaper to do this. So I thought that was a pretty big deal, especially because my newsletter really focuses a lot on how fossil fuel companies advertise and the amount of money they spend on advertising, what that advertising buys them, especially in news organizations, which, I think is a really questionable practice for news organizations to run ads like this. But
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so I wanted to know more about that decision. I wanted to know if there was a sort of a particular moment that led to it, how long it took. I wanted to know how it would affect the newspaper's operation. How much money did they really get from fossil fuel advertising, and is this going to hurt their subscription revenue? Any of that, and also I want to know why they banned fossil fuel ads but not car ads or not airline ads, or so it was a good conversation. Really good, I would say, honestly, I was really impressed by just the level of transparency within the conversation, because if you're a reporter, you're so used to asking a direct question and getting some bullshit runaround answer. You're on TV a lot, you understand that. And she had really direct answers to my questions, which I appreciated.
And you can actually hear the phone call that you made on the Drilled podcast, which you work with them a lot. Check out Drilled, the Madmen of Climate Denial. It's a great, great podcast that Emily is also a contributor to. And they just took your phone call and played it, which I loved listening to. Before I let you go, what about just the argument that we're hearing over natural gas as a, quote, bridge fuel within the Democratic debates, within the environmental movement? What can you tell us? I don't know. I can't find a specific. If you covered this specifically at Heated, forgive me. But what about natural gas? What do we need to know?
I think all you need to know about natural gas is that it's a fossil fuel. So whether it's cleaner than coal or oil is sort of irrelevant, because it's a fossil fuel. And what scientists tell us overwhelmingly is that we need to stop burning, extracting and burning and building new fossil fuel infrastructure. And so a bridge fuel, what does that mean? A bridge to what? A bridge to renewables? What the bridge fuel that we need is just renewable fuels. We don't really have time for a bridge fuel. What scientists tell us is that we have,
right, 11
years to really do the bulk of our transition. And the transition that we need to make is not to a bridge, it's to renewables. We have the technology that we need to just start doing that. We don't need to do something in between. Where we can make transitions to renewables, we make those transitions, and then we invest in new technology to meet the rest of the demand with renewables, because it is really important that we develop new technology. But we can start the transition now. We don't have to do this extra step to burn more fossil fuels. And if we burn more fossil fuels, if we burn more natural gas, even if we put restrictions on, if we invest in extracting and burning more fossil fuels, we will go over the carbon budget. And we won't reach the goals of the Paris Agreement, which is 2 degrees Celsius. That's point blank. That's right. That's science. That's not my opinion.
Right.
So if you are cool with us going over 2 degrees Celsius, which would have some really catastrophic impacts, then yeah, sure, let's use natural gas as a bridge fuel. But if you don't want to go above 2 degrees Celsius, we can't burn more natural gas. It's just I'm not advocating for anything. It's science.
That's just the science. No, that's what we know. It's true. Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Emily. That's always awesome. I'm loving the newsletter. Go subscribe right now. Heated.World. It's so easy. It comes in your email box every morning. Emily pours everything she's got into it. So well researched. A great journalist. Follow her on Twitter right now. And, you can always join me here on Stand Up. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you for having me again. Thanks for being such a great supporter of the work.
Of course. Yep. You're saving us all. Thank you. And that is it. Thank you to Dr. Arthur Caplan. Follow him on Twitter right now at Arthur Caplan. Follow Emily at mmorwee, EMORWEE, Heated.World. Subscribe to that. Thank you to both of them for joining me. That was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, even though it was very scary, both subjects. I appreciate you joining me here on the podcast. Don't forget to give us 5 stars where you're listening on iTunes, and consider writing out a whole rating there. That'd be great. Join us in the Patreon community. And you can find that on the show notes. Just go to PeteDominic.com or Patreon.com/PeteDominic. Sign up for a paid subscription, which is supporting and sustaining this podcast. Could not do it without over 350 people now in that community of awesome, generous, thoughtful, curious, passionate people who want to learn 3 days a week with me from my expert guests. So thanks. Out of time, out of energy, but not out of gas, because I just got a whole bunch of gas from my generators. So hopefully it wasn't too scary or too depressing. We'll help each other through it all, but that's all we have time for today. Bye-bye.